Thank you, Mrs Moon.
James Heappey.
Thank you, Mrs Moon. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate my honourable friend and fellow South West MP, the member for North Cornwall, for securing this important debate. It's the second debate in just over a week where the South West has turned up en masse to stand up for tourism and now today agriculture. I cannot claim to have any significant commercial fishing in my patch, but I do have a lot of farming, and I know how concerning the impact of Brexit is to farmers. There's been a lot of uncertainty over the last few years with low prices, the poorly administered basic payment scheme, and now the prospect of a significant change to the agricultural subsidy regime once we have left the EU and therefore the CAP. So I welcome very much the announcement by the Chancellor that the current agricultural funding under CAP Pillar 1 will be maintained until 2020. However, even after making that commitment, the UK government will be spending less on agricultural subsidy because we currently get such a bad deal from the CAP. It must be music to the Treasury's ears. But the end of the decade, Mrs Moon, is not that far away, and so the government needs to start articulating now what the long-term vision is for farming in the UK. I will, yes.
We've had many voices from the South West, but none yet from Dorset. And although Dorset may be the smallest county in the South West, it still represents nearly 10% of the workforce in terms of agriculture. Does my honourable friend recognise, in relation to the CAP, that there are opportunities for reform that, in fact, farmers have been calling for? And as my honourable friend, the member for North Cornwall, mentioned, specifically in relation to timing of payments and reform of the whole system, does he recognise that?
James Heappey, just for the member's understanding, he gains an extra minute.
I agree very much. And part of what I'm going to come back to later on is the importance of getting those voices of individual farmers heard. But this is not just a question about subsidy, although clearly that's the bit that most farmers will be listening out most keenly over, but about access to seasonal manpower, to markets, and the regulations that will be in place to facilitate that access. It's welcome, therefore, that the initial announcement has been that all existing EU legislation will be brought forward as UK law, and it will be amended and improved thereafter in the UK's interest. This at least gives farmers the reassurance that the standards and regulations under which they operate won't change in a blink. As for access to the single market, I detect a little inconsistency amongst the farmers in my constituency. Many in my patch have called for greater protection of the UK market to reduce the import of cheaper and frankly less tasty produce from elsewhere. I'm not sure that we should go down the route of protecting the market, because many in the agricultural sector are exporting enthusiastically, and we'd like to see more do so. Instead, our challenge is to promote UK produce in the UK and abroad, and I agree very much with my honourable friend from North Cornwall that a first step in that should be to look to make sure that procurement for public services prioritises British-produced food and drink. Now, forgive me, Mrs Moon, I agree also with my honourable friend's point about the availability of migrant labour. Just as was the case in the debate about the tourism industry last year, there's a very high demand for seasonal migrant labour to be able to come through. And the points system, thank heavens, moved away from by the government, would have not achieved the things that our farmers and holiday parks need, because it's not just rocket scientists that we want to see being given permits to come work in the UK, it's agricultural workers coming in on seasonal work permits too. And clearly that's going to require a very dynamic system for making sure that we award the right number of agricultural seasonal work permits to meet the demands of the agricultural industry at any one time. However people voted, Mrs Moon, back in June, the CAP was bloated and broken, and so now I think we have a real opportunity to set a system of our own that subsidises where necessary to ensure food security and to make our agricultural industry more resilient, with more exporters and for more profit. But there is a word of caution, and that is that there is a real danger that in the post-Brexit policy bun fight, the well-funded, large lobbying companies will have the biggest voice in that debate. And what we need to make absolutely sure of is that farmers, who are notorious for suffering in silence in the solitude of their tractors, actually get a seat at the table to come forward with their ideas for what the market needs to look like post-Brexit. They have an incredible amount of expertise, and far better to hear them contributing to this debate than the well-funded lobbyists up in London.